Okay, it's 10 o'clock. We will call the Sawyer County Administration Committee meeting to order. And Ms. Fitch, we'll start with the certification of compliance with open meetings law, please.
Meeting notice has been sent.
Thank you. Okay, next is roll call.
Tweed Schuman,
Here.
Dale Schluter,
Here.
James Schlender,
Here.
Ron Kinsley,
Here.
Tom Duffy.
Here.
Thank you. Let the record indicate we have a quorum. Meeting agenda has been presented. Okay, we're good with that. Moving on into public comment. Anyone here that would like to address the board at this time? Anyone, Mike?
Linda Zillmer.
Sure. Go ahead, Linda. Public comment.
Good morning, Linda Zillmer here. I have two comments this morning. First is thank you. I look forward to hearing your discussion on the new public notice policy. And I just want to repeat something I had mentioned before, that when there are multiple agendas available to look at on the website as they become updated, it would be helpful to have a date and a time of those agendas printed on those documents, so you can tell when things change. So maybe that could be part of your discussion before the policy. And my second comment is similar to the one that I made during the Finance Committee regarding the county developing and adopting a tax increment financing policy. My concerns are that I do not believe that a county administrator, although appointed to be the representative on the board on that joint board approving TIF districts, should be given the authority to or discretion to approve or disapprove the creation of TIF districts. I think that should come through committee and the county board. And I especially thought about that more listening to the Finance Committee, where I heard about the ongoing struggles with increasing health and human services costs, the $8 million debt assumption. You know, that courtroom going forward, there's been a lot of time and legal dollars spent over the years deciding, you know, ultimately not to go to referendum. So that's been taken out of the hands of the taxpayers. It will be the above the levy limit debt that will finance that. But conversely, TIF districts affect the revenue. So just as all supervisors are going to go on record regarding the debt, I think all supervisors should go on record about the amount of revenue they are going to forego in future years, especially as costs increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Summer. Anyone else? Anybody else, Mike, on?
No.
All right, moving on into number 5. Approval of minutes from our previous meeting, admin, January 14th, 2021. Mr. Kinsley, you had some comments?
There's a couple things to clean up when they're cleaned up. One is the attendance and the other one is the bottom line of the next meeting. With the cleanup, I'm gonna make a motion to approve this presented.
Okay. Second, Mr. Duffy? Okay. Got a motion by Mr. Kinsley to approve the meeting minutes with those amendments. You have those, Lynn?
Yes.
Okay. Second by Mr. Duffy. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Thank you. Good catch, Mr. Kinsley. Number 6, Veteran Service Department report. Gary?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
So for January, we had 471 phone calls, 220 letters, and 94 office visits. For VA disability compensation and pension claims, we submitted 9 disability and pension claims for that month, and we've received so far this year $713 in initial payment for successful claims. Our training is up to date. Miss Peterson is her national accreditation came through, so she's you can find her on the OGC, the VA's website. We're working on getting her access right now. It's probably going to take a month to get a card where she can actually log in to the VA database and check on our veterans, which is really good because that's also where she can upload claims for them versus we doing that, which is super. But we're doing fine. Any questions?
Yeah, Gary, has this COVID affected any of your office visits or transportation like you had in the past?
Yeah, it slowed down our transportation last year, and obviously our grant money, I don't remember how much we got back, but it was like, I think it was less than half that we normally get from the state, because it's based on how many runs we did. It's not on, they weren't prorate or anything, so that took a hit, but on the same breath, I guess, we didn't use those expenses, we didn't know, it didn't cost us any money by not running people either, so. It wasn't the best one, but this one. As far as people going into the office, we are bringing people in, we keep the door shut, we kind of scream at the door on what they need, do they really need stuff. For some people that are really scared of the virus, I worked with them on the phone to do their claims. And so when I had everything completed, it was kind of like, drive up window, I have them pull up outside the building at a certain time, and I go out through the paperwork, have them sign what, review what I did, sign the paperwork and file the claim. Other people want to come in face to face regardless. And that's worked out fine, with the exception of I got nailed and taken out of the fight for about 11 to 12 days, I guess, working days, because I had somebody come in that was just tested and told to go home and quarantine, and didn't. I found out by accident, and anyway, so I had to go home and I had to self-quarantine. So Michelle, and I hate that, because at work, doing work at home, it's 3 steps for every 1 step I do at the office. So it takes 3 more steps at home to get stuff on, it seems like, and you still don't have the complete, ability to do everything that you do at the office versus on. So anyway, yeah, that took me out 6 days before I could get tested. I got tested and I had to wait 72 hours. And despite me telling them that I've already had this, I still come back negative. Then I come back to work immediately when I get phone call. But so that kind of stings. You take, trying to help people, but they didn't help me or anybody else. It was like an hour and a half working time, which I could have done over the phone. But anyway, that happens, I guess. So, did that answer your question, sir?
That does. Thank you. Anyone else have anything for Gary?
Thank you for all you do.
Gary, you did meet our architect, right?
Yes, sir.
There,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Kane, and he reviewed your building.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any thoughts you want to give us regarding, you're aware that we're looking at constructing, right, over 5th Street and adding on, and there was some talk about maybe moving your office into that new construction.
Yes, sir. That was
Do you have
something-
you visited with him about that?
Yes, sir. I don't need the basement. Obviously, we've got a basement or a half basement down there. It's turned into a storage shed for the county. It's got, part of it, the most important thing is Mike's got backup for Bayfield County servers down in that basement. But it has nothing to do with us. And the other part that I use down there is I got some boxes of flags that I order every year to take care of all our cemeteries, plus our own flagpole, plus the county's flag, county offices flagpole for Wisconsin flags. I put that in my budget too, to take care of this for the Wisconsin flag. So it's a minor storage, really downstairs is all I use. If I had the top floor, you could probably cut out some of the square footage up there as well. Look at, because there's some, it doesn't make sense, how it's built, everything is modified. So there's a few square footage that come out of that. But as far as the only concern I have, I shouldn't say the only concern, but the primary concern I have is some of our veterans are very aggressive in their behavior and in the way they speak. And I'm concerned, especially when they're angry and upset for whatever reason. And they will come in screaming, hollering, swearing, cussing, aggressively. And I would We handle that when they come in, we just take, set it down, find the whole thing. And it's not everybody, but there's a few. And I would be very upset if somebody come in here doing that and somebody called the police on them, because it's not what you would consider, I think, normal behavior. If you're tracking with me, I'm not trying to justify it, but it is what it is. And I'd be very upset if somebody called the police on them. And then it's just gonna make problems worse. So I like being part of the county, I really do, but being set aside has been beneficial for that reason. And this is the point I wanna make. And I'm not trying to be special, but I'm just telling you that is my concern. In the past, Ray Bachman, 3 years old before, worked here in this building, and they had him shoved back. I think he's back in the DA's office, prior, what it is now. And I think they had his files downstairs in the basement. So anytime somebody come in, he had to go downstairs to get the file and come back, find it, and come back up. And it's not necessarily, you've been down there, it's not secure. I've been down there a couple of times. It's not anything I would call secure for anybody's files. I would not want to see that either. So I do have a file room. We're trying to go more and more paperless. That's what the DA wants, but it needs more paper for me to tell the truth. The federal government doesn't have the paper, I get it. And we spend our money on that paper. But those hard files are important as well. When the computer systems go down, people walk in. You can't do anything anymore in this country without electronics. It seems like having a hard copy and be able to take it and look at what that veteran has, what's going on with them, and using that information to help, direct whatever they need at that time is important. So I still need some paper storage space. Is the other part. We will transition as much as we can electronically, but it's not a fail-safe. That's it. I've got some counseling room. That's the other thing, because of COVID-19, it shut it down. It shut it down last year at about March. But Thursdays and Fridays, I had anywhere from a half a dozen to 16 people in the back room. I would hate to have to compete for this one. Not that this one's going to be here anymore, maybe not. But having to compete for a room. It was nice having it back there because they could go back there, they could speak freely. Nobody was in the chili, listening in to what's going on with them. And that I guess that's something else I would hate to lose. Okay, and I guess everything by law too. That old building, I can't get people with wheelchairs into Michelle's office. I've been holding back some money to modify that if you weren't going to destroy it, and I'm sure that's going to be automatic. It will be wheelchair accessible, handicap accessible for people, of disabilities to get in and get out and do business. So other than that, I'm good.
I appreciate that. Mr. Schlender.
Mr. Chairman, as one of the many combat veterans that we have within this county, I can attest to Mr. Elliott's comments regarding the language that we use. Veterans are colorful in their language and their experiences. I would hope that this county would take to heart what Mr. Elliott has proposed. And it's really important that we provide the services that these veterans are entitled to, and the sacrifices that they've done get forgotten over time, but it's not forgotten to them. Mr. Elliott sometimes is the only contact between the relief that they need and the life that the life that the veterans are living. So providing confidentiality, providing a backup for their, for their information, providing a safe place for them to come in and be able to speak freely, I think is crucial. And I think that when we have this conversation in front of the full board in terms of what the commitment of this county is going to be, that needs to also be included in this conversation, because the veterans are going to be adversely impacted with, they're already not getting the services that they can get. An upgrade would be with the construction that we're doing. And I just hope we don't lose sight of that.
Thank you. Mr. Kinsley.
It was talked about at Public Works last night, considering the items that you brought up. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Terry. Thanks for all you do. Okay, moving on then to number 7, information technology. Mike?
Hello. Apparently my report didn't make the agenda, but I'm showing it on the screen here for your benefit. Let's go through some of the projects we've recently completed. Security camera for the admin wing is installed. The zoning department has scanned most, if not all, of their permits, sanitary, land use permits, conditional use permits, and they're in Laserfish now, so they're moving forward with that. And then the next step we'll take is incorporating them into the Nova system. They're already there. We just need to point them to Laserfish. So it's easier to maintain for that staff. We just converted the sheriff's department old website to the county's website. It was kind of an old creaky platform that was very much a security risk. So we did that last week. We are wrapping up a security analysis with a vendor, and we don't have the reports yet. I imagine we'll have it by next month, and we can share the results with you there. We also migrated the sheriff's email server to Office 365, basically a cloud email system. Their server was behind several years of upgrades. Let's see, down in Winter, Pat Sanchez had lost her internet connection back to us, and we reestablished that and did some cleanup there. Projects in going on right now. The ambulance, it's not on the report here, but the ambulance department has recently switched over to a new dispatching system called I Am Responding. As soon as a dispatch is made, it electronically goes, and we're going to be displaying those runs in all of the ambulance garages, in their bays, in Hayward, Ojibwa, Stone Lake, and Radisson. They'll all be there, and it's kind of a neat system. It shows the CAD, the dispatch, as it comes in instantly, and also shows the location of their vehicles. So it's kind of a neat system. Other than that, let's see. I just wanted to add a little bit to Gary's comment there about the basement. We are housing some servers in the Veterans Building for ourselves and also for Bayfield County for data backups. So just another consideration. If something happens to that building, we'll need to find another location. And that's it, unless there's any other questions.
Thank you. Anything for Mike, guys?
Done an excellent job running these meetings. Last night is probably a real challenge for the day.
Thank you.
Mike, I'm really
Come
impressed.
in a closed session like that. What, Mr. Thunder? I'm sorry.
Just impressed, Mr. Colson.
Thank you.
I agree. Yes, sir.
When you get that radio system set up, I would believe we invited the watch system or something. See it in operation.
For the ambulance, I'll coordinate that with Mr. Dunstan. Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that, Mike.
PlayStation controller.
I think we're all in agreement with it. Good job. All right. Okay, moving on to number 8, Human Resources Report.
Good morning.
Mr. Willard, yes.
We just wanted to touch briefly on the COVID leave. As you'll remember, last year, there was a Families First Act, which granted some 80 hours of emergency sick leave to employees and also an extended FMLA leave for employees who had trouble, or like if their kids' school or daycare was closed, they could apply and have FMLA leave under that. All of those leaves sunsetted at the end of 2020. So right now, the new federal relief package that is before the government, the American Rescue Plan. In there, if it passes, there are some provisions for paid sick leave. And that would go until September 30th of 2021. Right now, if somebody is exposed to COVID or has COVID or whatever, they're using their own sick leave banks that the county provides. Should this legislation pass, we would go back and credit time taken, qualifying time taken to the new leave if it passes, the government. We just kind of wanted to update you guys on that if you have any questions. No?
Anyone?
Okay. Then the HR report, we had a very busy week. We had 3 new employees start Monday and 1 start on Tuesday. Recruiting for 2 EMT basic positions, and once we hire those, our ambulance service will be 100% staffed, which is great because there's a lot of services that are having issue recruiting staff, so we're in pretty good shape there. We are still recruiting for the CCS service facilitator. We did have a candidate. That person had some family issues and chose to decline working with us. We are scheduling interviews for that position next week. We do have 3 applicants for
Oh,
that.
good.
Recruiting a CPS social worker. We had one of ours leave. She's going up to Bayfield County. She lives in Bayfield County. It's just a better fit for her. We brought on 2 limited term emergency management interns. They're going to help with the vaccine clinics, scheduling, PPE distribution, all that kind of stuff. So that'll be good for both emergency management and public health. Oh yeah, time clocks plus. We're moving forward with that. Nate with the ambulance department has his schedule built into it, and in fact, training for his staff is going on right now. So they're getting trained today and tomorrow, and then hopefully for this next payroll, we will have them clock in the new system and in the old system so that we make sure everything's working correctly. And then hopefully roll them into it. Well, it would be 2 payrolls out. And Health and Human Services has their hours codes and a bunch of different stuff that they need. We got that. We had another meeting on that yesterday, and so we're very close to getting them up and running on it. So those are 2 big departments to get up and going on it. Once we get them up, the rest of the product should go smooth.
Good. Thank you, Rose. Any questions for Ms. Lillywhite?
Did a good job. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate all you do, Rose. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, moving on then to number 9. County Administrator's Report. Will we start with letter A then, Mr. Hoff?
Yeah.
Or do you have a report you want to give?
Yeah, I'll just talk about the public notice process. Been working with our new county clerk, Lynn Fitch, obviously on just the processes that we utilize to create these agendas and get these meetings up and running. One of the changes that she's implemented that we've talked about is the notification, the public notification of the meetings. Prior, there was an agenda prepared, and then there was another document called a public notice that kind of highlighted all of the agenda items and all the meetings. And it's somewhat difficult to keep all of those in sync. I mean, we're making changes to agendas and updating, and then this other notice that would have to be updated. And, sometimes they'd be in sync, and sometimes they would. The agenda is the official activity of the meeting. And so forward from here on in, we'll use that as the public notice, since that is the legal document that prescribes what you can talk about at a public meeting. So she's given notice to the media about that, and they'll be getting those agendas on a timely basis here on in. We're also talking with Lynn and the department directors about the agenda preparation, trying to streamline that to get the information and documentation on those agendas more promptly and accurately. We continually struggle with getting things late. Things are happening all the time, and trying to get you the best up-to-date information yet it causes us to put an agenda out, 3 or 4 times, but we can work with staff to try and get those changes minimal. It'll be easier and less confusing for the public and for you guys to understand what it is we're going to be talking about, and give you a little bit more time for preparation and reading the documentation and materials prior to a meeting. So that's kind of what we're after with that whole process. Any questions?
Yeah, and Lynn, you can date and time these agendas as they come out, if you're gonna change one because you got additions.
We'll
I
have
mean,
to find
prior to
out
the
where that
24
can be
hour.
done, because it's in a software program right now that has its own features, so we'll have to investigate where
Okay.
that may be.
Can't you just add that, does it come across as PDFs, right? You have to have a date stamp on it.
Yeah, there probably is a way to do a date timestamp, but we'll have to look at that.
Okay, so then moving on, second courthouse or courtroom discussion.
Tom, Lynn, you and I talked about separating certification of compliance with open meetings law and roll call. Right, separating those two, and is there any talk about that, or as far as the agenda list?
Yeah, and that's something we talked about in finance too, roll call as a separate agenda item. And I think, it kind of relates back to your board rules on how an agenda is structured. And maybe, that's another thing that you want to look at within your board rules as to what is prescribed for an agenda. Because it says an agenda shall have these things in this order, and make sure that what you are doing complies with what the rules say you should be doing. So just procedural thing, detail.
So we should I would probably think that we need to probably put that on for the next admin meetings, that we can get that presented. And that's an issue across the board with all of our. And so we probably need to standardize that, because I think that would help with this pitch. The purpose of standardizing is so that we can find where the changes are, that we could recreate the wheel intended.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Maybe just get it done.
It's on the agenda today.
You guys are the pros. Just do it.
Yeah.
We don't read the.
That requires a motion to amend it. What they're saying is that.
Slightly different than the
Right,
policy.
so the rules state what it is. We got to.
Okay, good point.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Hoffman.
All right. So Courthouse Project, we've talked about this over the years here. The point we're at now is, we've got the, well, backing up a step, back to the beginning, back in 2017, the county board passed a resolution supporting a second circuit court and the associated personnel and facilities that are required to have a second circuit court. Since that time, we've worked on several plans to accommodate the facilities and the space for that second courtroom. Earlier in 2020, we made an agreement with the city, and the county board passed a resolution for that as well, authorizing the closure of 5th Street and the extension of California Avenue to accommodate building courtroom facility across 5th Street that would attach to this building and to the county jail, which really cleans up the traffic, not only for prisoners, but for staff walking across the street to get inmates to and from court. Several good things happened with that new plan, which then caused us to revisit what we had contemplated for a plan. And so we revisited with all of staff this week, that being the sheriff's department, the judge, clerk of courts, DA, IT, everyone involved in the court system, kind of reviewed where we were at with the plan, which actually a very good concept came out of that. Now that we've decided on that location and how it interacts with the two buildings, I think the sheriff's department specifically had some great ideas on the functionality of how those two courtrooms would kind of fit together. Originally, when we contemplated, putting a courtroom somewhere, we didn't contemplate any changes needed to the original courtroom. It's already a functioning courtroom. That's great. But now that we've got two courtrooms end to end, And as we look at the workflow and the staffing needed to move people in and out of courts, it's very advantageous to have a common lobby area between the two courtrooms and have traffic coming in and out of those courtrooms in a central location, which then allows secure access to happen. It allows court security staff to be in one place, which then would require the original courtroom to kind of flip around, and so that the opening would be on the other side. So it does take some remodeling in order to accommodate that. Certainly something that can be done. It's something we've been originally contemplated within the plan, but I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. And so, we've been working with the architect, Mr. John Kane, about, that concept and how it fits into the plan. So in finance committee this morning, we talked about, the cost and the debt that is required to fund this building. We did talk about that in the budget deliberations that you did in 2020. And again, that budget, authorized, money appropriated for construction of the courthouse. The next step in that process then is authorization to issue the debt. So in finance this morning, and what's going to the board next week is a resolution. It's called an initial resolution to authorize the issuance of debt. What that does is then allows us to pay for these construction costs, and we would start incurring those then, with architectural fees, engineering fees, the bidding of a construction manager, all those things that happen as next steps. And you have to have the funding appropriated before that happens. So when you get to the county board next Thursday, that will be the item of consideration of the authorization of that initial resolution. So, what we've been doing in these committee meetings is trying to provide you with all of the information that we have, so that you can make an informed decision about that next procedure. So with us today, we do have John King, the architect, who can add some more words of wisdom on the plan and where we're at with it. We also have on the line Chris Channing, who is the district court administrator. We've been working with him as well. Mr. Channing and the chief judge are the ones who have to approve any plan that we do on court space. So we're making sure that we are in compliance with the regulations on what a courtroom should look like. So between those two things, or three things, or five things, whatever we're up to, those are the kinds of pieces of the puzzle that we've been trying to put together to get that information in front of you to the board. So we've got different committees with different levels of expertise here. Finance, I heard more in-depth conversation about the debt, how it works, about just the buildings themselves. Yes, administration, the leaders of the organization here, making sure that you're informed and you get any questions answered ahead of time that we can. So if you've got questions, comments as we work through this, be happy to answer any of those. And with that, why don't I turn it over to Mr. Channing, and you can help us, Mr. Channing, with any comments that you have with where we're at in the process and that sort of thing. So if Mr. Channing is available.
Yes, hi, good morning, Mr. Channing.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Yeah, Mr. Channing, if you could just kind of walk through where we're at in your perspective on what you see this project being, and how it's working, and what other information you can provide to help the board in their decision-making process.
I think you are very well along where the process is going. The amendments or changes to the plans that were discussed over the last week and really came in formation yesterday from the Sheriff's Department, I think will really assist and really focus on some of the major concerns as far as not only adding on a second courtroom, but also the security aspect from the sheriff's end of things in regards to not only for prisoner flow or defendant flow that are in custody, but also with the most recent decision in regards to the layout of both courtrooms and how that will make it easier for staff to not only staff both courtrooms, but also for a response issue. some other excellent points in regards to the most recent developments and plans, or I think it will also assist in reducing a lot of the additional foot traffic that some of the other county agencies may see due to the present layout that you presently have. So far, everything that has been proposed and is just in draft format is certainly well within the Supreme Court rules as far as what we would ask for. And I think, we're, well along the process, and it looks good from the district's perspective as well as the chief judge's perspective.
So, Mr. Channing, you're very much in favor then of that, the new idea of the central lobby that the sheriff proposed and Mr. Kane presented this morning?
I think it will also afford us an opportunity to, obviously, while you're going to be going into, passing a referendum potentially, I think it will afford us an opportunity to save on some potential costs, whether it be technology or other things. I think also with recent occurrences across the state, but specifically some things that have happened in Sawyer County, I think the security aspect is pivotal for what we're going to be doing.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Channing? Yeah.
Chris, this is John Kane. I have a question.
Yes, John.
I'm looking at the informational bulletin that was provided by the director of the state courts. This was back in March of 2020. That outlined the 3 phases of annual efforts at bringing new judgeships online within the state.
Yes.
And Sawyer County is in what I would call the 3rd wave of counties. Can you speak at all to that schedule, do you believe? And I know the letter was nearly a year old now, and maybe things have changed, but if I read the letter and interpret it correctly, that's what I'm going to ask of you. Is it that as this effort goes forward by the state, Sawyer County would need to have a suitable courtroom space in line by August of 2023?
I want to state that would be May of that year. I don't have the in front of me, sorry, but I believe it would be May of that year. August of that year is when the new judge would be started, but I believe the statute that the legislature passed and is in law indicated that it would be May of the year of the election that the courthouse should be finished, even though the judge would not be taking that seat until August of that year. And also, in addition, I believe also when the legislative, which now codified as law, I believe the director would be naming those courts November the year prior to the election, so that it could be on the ballot. So it is, timelines as far as when things are built. I will just reaffirm that Sawyer County is in the 3rd tier. They will be in the 3rd tier as long as there is ample space provided. And I have also had similar discussions with another county in our district that is named, where we've had to clarify this for them as far as when construction needs to be completed. So I'm familiar with sort of the timeline. I just want to make sure that the year is accurate, but it would be by May, need to be completed by May of the year of the election.
That would be 23.
So I think that's 23.
Yeah, okay.
Because the first tier is this spring, the next tier is next spring, and then the following tier would be 23.
Go ahead, Mr. Kinsley. Okay.
Mr. Channing, could you clarify that? Because I thought there was discussion before about, if we were substantially complete, or you come and visit us and you see a building being erected, the judge isn't coming on board until August. If the building is 80% complete in May, but not complete, what happened.
You would still be getting a judgeship there. The reason that we are so specific is because historically in the past, there have been some counties that have been provided a judgeship, but have not built facilities for that judge. So that's why the director's office is being so specific as far as the timeline. You know, if you've got, you know, the whole dog, you're building the facility, you've obviously already passed the referendum, you're paying for it. I would not be concerned in regards to if it's not quite done by May, in regards to not getting that judgeship approved. I think the big thing is that we need to have assurances when we discuss it with the Director of State Courts, Judge Koshnick, that, you know, this is what Sawyer County has been doing. I've been keeping them in the loop all along, all the excellent steps you've been taking so far. So they're very positive in regards to what you've been doing. It's just to ensure on the court's behalf that we would actually have a facility when that judge is going to be taking the bench. I know it's a little bit of gray area, so I apologize. It's not as clear cut, especially with, you know, what was codified in the statute. But if you have, for instance, your example, Mr. Hoff, in regards to 80% of the building erected or the construction completed, you know, that's certainly not going to reflect poorly on you.
Thank you. We can talk a little bit more about the details of the plan. There's some things that the county board still needs to kind of think about. The layout, obviously the layout isn't finalized with respect to a couple of things. We talked a little bit about some of those things in public works, but you should be aware of them as well. You know, we had Gary Elliott from Veteran Services over, you know, part of the discussion that generated some discussion about the veteran services is the condition of the building across the street. You know, it's been some maintenance issues over there. You know, we thought perhaps this would be the time if that building is old and it has issues that we could move veteran services to a different location and, you know, create further parking over there, or whatever the case may be. So, you know, obviously veteran services has some certain requirements. We would want to certainly meet those, whether, you know, veteran services ends up in this building or another building within the city or county. But that's a thought. It's something that you don't have to do as part of this project. It was just a thought that, you know, if we're doing construction, maybe that's the time to take a look at that facility. So there is construction money in the plan actually for the square footage of that building if we wanted to take care of the old building at this time. There's also money within the plan as we originally contemplated to change, you know, some of the areas of the court personnel in this wing, that being court, district attorney, victim witness, and the criminal justice folks. Currently, the criminal justice, there's 2 individuals from Justice Point working in the room next door that I had previously occupied. But as we ramp up those criminal justice programs, those pretrial diversion programs, and the space required for those, you know, we probably need some space, you know, like 2 offices for those individuals, some meeting space for smaller group type meetings, drug testing, or, you know, other activities that they would be performing within that function. And we're at a little bit of a disadvantage since, you know, they just started their activities here and what those diversion programs would look like. But we've asked for their expertise on designing, you know, the space for that. So in the plans that you have, there is contemplation of, you know, using this space for 2 offices, that small meeting group, that kind of activity, which, you know, as we look long term on what we need to do in the county to help some of these people and prevent bigger problems from arising out of people that have issues and problems that we can provide services for. You know, I think that's an important component of you know, everything that we're trying to do in the county and how it affects health and human services and sheriff's department and all those things that roll up into you know, these people that are having issues that we can help with. So, you know, if that's done, then what do we do for a meeting room? Originally we had in the plans, an additional assembly room that currently isn't in the plan. But as we talk about the need for that, the need for maybe a bigger room than this, occasionally there are committee meetings in here that can't accommodate the number of people that we have in for zoning meetings or some of the other meetings that we have in this facility. So if we do contemplate a different assembly room, what size does that need to be? And you want to contemplate, a specific room that could accommodate your county board meetings as well. Currently we're using, setting up and taking down desks and whatnot in the current courtroom, which could continue, certainly, especially if there's 2 courtrooms that hopefully allows us, the time and space to continue to use in courtroom for those kinds of functions. But, are we better served looking at, a different meeting space for the types of meetings that are in this room? What other topics were still on the table, John, that we outlined this morning?
Before we leave that, Tom, let me ask Mr. Schwender too to chime in on criminal justice coordinating and Justice Point. Jim, do you see diversion programs taking place here, or maybe like a Bashiki or some of the other institutions?
So the current contemplation was that most of the diversion programming would happen for those who were incarcerated would be in the jail. And we're trying to work on programming that would alleviate the jail population. Jail population right now, even with programming, still operating about 80%. Implementing the programming would be splitting so that we would have some facilities available for tribal members who don't have transportation for to meet the traveling from the various communities in the reservation to Hayward, which is an obstacle, especially now with it being so cold, and winter comes every year, right? And so the offices are being contemplated for Justice Point to be set up in here, and ideally you would want one place just for safety concerns and for monitoring to be here and in proximity to the courtroom, because for non-compliance you have a quicker response. So so the short answer would be yes, we'd want these services housed within what would be contemplated as the expansion, for necessity, for safety.
Thank you.
So as we work out, the spacing requirements, and these things that still require some contemplation, that's certainly one of them. Lost my train of thought there on that. So I'll let John kind of take over while I gather my thoughts on the next steps here.
Yeah, the components to this project, and Tom, I think you've outlined them well. There is the courts addition with any associated remodeling that's part of that. There is the court wing remodeling that Tom mentioned. There's Veteran Services that we've been talking about. But then and that's what I had included in my original budget, updated budget from 2 years ago. But in the discussions as has been shared today and came up in yesterday's conversations, the idea of flipping the courtroom is now one of those topics. And then the other, as Tom mentioned, and I think confirmed that if this is in fact the right place for criminal justice point, then we need to think about a new assembly room in the new construction that is sized appropriately for whatever functions are determined that room is to be used for. And so it's those elements that we talked about in finance that brought the project as a cap up to $8 million as a project cost. What I've said to Tom is that by your board meeting next week, I will have updated our budget, so I will now be able to include, if you will, line items for the restructuring of the courtroom, as well as the addition of the assembly room to the project. So that's essentially the outline. Now, there are comments, no doubt, that haven't been asked about how did the budget creep so much from 2 years ago? And there are various things. We're talking about having a construction manager as part of the team. I think that's in the county's best interest. They will manage the budget, they will manage the schedule. There's also the unfortunate aspect of inflation, that when we put the original budget numbers together, we were dealing with a bid time of 2020, and now we're a year after that, 2021. So inflation's running roughly 4% a year, and so I factored that into the new budget as well. So then there's just a number of other little small items that, you know, creep up and continue to help define the project cost. I do want to say that we talked a lot about trying to understand construction costs and project costs. Construction is bricks and mortar. It's what's fixed in the construction. There are then a whole long list of other items that we call non-construction. My fees, the construction manager, furniture, telecommunications, all of those various things total to a non-construction. And that will take you from the construction budget to the project budget. And it's the project budget number that you're concerned about in terms of working with the $8 million. I was specific in asking Chris about the calendar schedule because time is of the essence, if I can be so direct. If May of 2023 is the date, in theory, that we have to be completed, that's 25, 26 months of both design and construction. The construction, I know, is going to have to be phased, as you can imagine. We have to complete the new addition to move the judge and their staff into that, so then we can then spend the time to remodel the existing courthouse. So there will, courtroom rather. So there will be some phased construction. So I think delaying the project becomes problematic, if you will, in terms of having that facility nearly complete by the time this new judge position arrives here in Sawyer County.
A couple other comments with that too. With the time is of the essence comment, the city is also starting construction on the California Avenue extension. You know, they want to go out for bids early in the construction season here, so we get good results on that. So they plan on issuing or submitting for bids in early March for that extension. With regard to the $8 million number, you know, and part of that is the arrangement that we have with the city to do California Avenue, and they pay Fifth Street and the costs associated with that. So county board passed a resolution authorizing them to continue at a cost to the county of about $410,000. So, you know, between that and you know, the project budget, you know, that's where we have a not to exceed number of $8 million. That doesn't mean, you know, if you pass a resolution to issue debt for up to $8 million, it doesn't mean that you need to issue debt for $8 million. Once we get the final costs, it'll be what it'll be, but it will not exceed $8 million.
Mr. Slender.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, and Mr. Kinsley or Mr. Hoff can help me with the discussion of this. If we, in the decision of the county board not to move forward with this project, would there be renovations that we would need to do to this building right now in order for it to be COVID compliant? Has there been a discussion about that? Because I think COVID is something that it's not going to be temporary. I think it's going to cause a permanent reassessment of our facilities and ensuring that we have good air quality for both the employees as well as for the citizens. Has there been a discussion about that? Do we have any kind of analysis of that?
We did add, air handler. I forget what they put in, but they did put in systems to improve the air quality circulating through the building, some of that kind of thing. I'm not sure what COVID compliance means. There's no official code for code compliance. We've done things for buildings to the operations that allow us, like plexiglass barriers that we put around. I'm not aware of any changes that will be required if we didn't move forward with the project.
I mean, we're essentially dealing with the building that was built in 1963. And so we're 2023, and COVID is adapted already where we have different variants. And the solution so far has been to wear 2 masks. I don't know if that's going to be a viable option going forward. So, I mean, the alternative would be if we don't make these improvements to protect the different constituents that are going to be impacted by that, then I think we would have to, at least have a preliminary discussion of what the alternatives would be to ensure the safety. So I don't know if Mr. Kinsley's done that with Public Works or not.
No, except for like Mr. Huff said, there's been little things that have been done. And they're cleaning the building. I can't say they're cleaning it better than they did before, but they're cleaning the building. And I'm aware there's been no COVID cases from any employees. But you're right. I think that would be something to be looked at.
Part of the improvements too, like the contemplation of remodeling this one kind of cleans up the traffic flow. Keeps employees protected behind certain areas. So there is that aspect of it as well.
Mr. Slater?
With due respect, I think putting the cart before the horse on this one. The flu kills about 40,000 people in this country every year, and nobody bats an eye. Let's wait until we see what the new normal is going to be with COVID before we start planning how to deal with that. We have no idea. Is it going to continue to roar up like this every year, or is it going to become something like the flu? Hey, if you don't want COVID, get your COVID shot. Don't like the shots, don't bother. If you catch it, it's your fault. Stuff like that. It's hopefully, I pray, it's just going to become another flu that we deal with in the this.
Perhaps Mr. Channing or Mr. Kane could add on to that. We did have some discussion about maybe having removable seats and whatnot to accommodate change in the jury, spacing of the jury, that kind of thing. Did you have any comments with regard to that?
Well, there is the ability to provide some flexibility in the design of the courtroom to meet some of those needs. It does change how the proceedings take place in terms of where the gallery people might be, etc. I mean, I think the difficulty in this discussion is to be absolutely 100% safe in the sense that you have total social distancing within the jury box and everything else. The normal courtroom size that we are recommending has to be enlarged by several hundred feet to provide for that spacing. So then the question is, are we overthinking it, if you will? And that's a difficult decision, difficult conversation to have. There's no reason to overbuild if you don't have to, and I don't know if you have to in this regard. There are courtrooms, hundreds of courtrooms all over the entire country that have accommodated court proceedings within existing courtroom settings. And some of that exists here in your own courtroom. And I think some of that is only going to continue with screening and everything else. I think the other thing that we're seeing, and I think it's true here in Sutter County, thank God for technology, because there's more and more every day is being done remotely. And so the court proceedings are happening not always in a courtroom setting. And I think as technology continues to improve, that's only going to continue to, I think, be the case. I think that's quickly becoming the new normal. That doesn't mean we don't need courtrooms. It just means that there are more options available to attorneys and to judges and counties as to how they deliver courtroom services.
So the only thing I'd add, and I agree with Mr. Slater's assessment that this is probably premature, but it warrants a little bit of at least consideration. In the history of the United States, the only other real thing that's been measured against the loss of life under this pandemic was the flu and influenza that happened in the 20s. And government and local officials took major steps to address
how they interacted with their constituents at that time. And there have been other pandemics that have impacted the United States since then, where there has been modifications. There was the AIDS epidemic that happened in the 80s. There was, right. I mean, well, there was other things, right? And so we've always made accommodations. We've done something, and so it's not outside this, not outside the realm for us to at least have that initial discussion. I mean, the virtual component, we have that coming up here. That's a response that we've done to try to address the concerns for county board members and their work schedule accommodations. So I'm just making sure that that stays relevant and that we just don't repeat, learn from our other mistakes so that we have that going forward and we're informed going forward. That's all.
Mr. Hahn.
Tom, I do believe that in the scope of the work, this would go forward, that the engineers could make an assessment of the systems here in the building with regards to air quality, and then provide the county with some recommendations.
Yeah, one final thought on that. There was a jury trial scheduled for yesterday, which fortunately got canceled. And I say that because of the space needs within our building. There was a plan committee meeting in this room yesterday morning, which may not have happened in this room because when we have a jury trial, they need to get all those people in. And I just came in, saw the blue arrows on the floor. There was paths. Okay, come this way and sign in and go that way. And then they use this room and the other UW Extension conference room because it has the video capabilities because the people, potential jurors need to view what's going on in court. And so they use these two rooms when they have jury trials. So again, it kind of goes to the lack of meeting space that we currently have, especially room sizes and conference rooms that are needed. So.
Mr. Kane, have you taken that into consideration, what he's talking about right there in the new construction? These jury rooms that they need prior to court?
I think it gives good reason for having an assembly room or jury assembly, which happens now in the courtroom. There are not a lot of options right now, frankly, in this plan. I think that only reinforces the need to have this new assembly room, if in fact that this room is now going to be used by Justice Court.
If Mr. Kane, if Veterans Service were to stay where they're at, would there be room for an assembly room? Because you said you had made room in one of these.
In the budget?
In the budget.
Well, I think that's where I would like to put some additional numbers into this. And I'm reminded by what Tom had said, we have the 400,000 that comes off the top of the 8 million, I believe. Is that right?
Correct.
So I will know more in a couple of days.
Great.
And within the number that I have for veteran services, I'm hopeful that there are other options that the county might explore. Maybe as opposed to necessarily building a brand new building for them. I think Gary was clear and frank with you this morning in his conversation with you about what he's doing and the needs that they have for space. Pretty consistent, I believe, with conversations you've had with him in the past. And it's the same conversation I had listening to him yesterday.
Okay. So we have a resolution coming to county board next week, Tom?
Yeah, so just to kind of summarize all of these things, the step that we're at is looking for the authorization to proceed with the issuance of debt when that time comes. But we need that authorization at this time so that we can start spending the dollars that are required to keep the project moving along. Obviously, we've got the city looking to do their work, so they need some direction on if they're proceeding or not. And we've got a time crunch, but we've got a deadline to meet as far as the construction completion. So, the sooner the better on that. We've been talking about this several times. And again, if you've got questions, comments, that we can provide information at that county board meeting so that you can make, informed and intelligent decision on that. We're certainly happy to provide whatever it is that you require. With regard to, the resolution that's going to be before the board, that is that authorization to proceed with the issuance of debt. It is a resolution. Mr. Channing used the word referendum. It's not, it's not a referendum, it's a resolution that we've been passing along the way here. It doesn't require a referendum as long as the county board votes or 3/4 passage of that resolution. That's in lieu of a referendum. The other alternative is, just like exceeding the levy limit, there is a provision in the statute to go to referendum to exceed the levy limit. There's also a provision to go to referendum to issue debt. There's about 5 different ways you can issue debt. The most common way is the way we're proceeding with is elected officials or constituents to do that. So again, that's where we're at for next Thursday evening.
Do you want to say anything about the levy model and the tax rate that this gentleman put together for us, and you and Mike, as far as how we pay for this?
Yeah, so in finance this morning, we talked about, the debt plan. It's one thing to issue the debt, it's another thing to pay it. And so we've got a financial plan to, how it affects the tax rate, the tax levy in future years, and trying to minimize the fluctuations, the ups and downs. Looking at the extinguishing of the debt or the jail debt that's out there that goes away in a few years. The debt that we're doing for capital items, laying on top of that the debt for this construction, and how that all fits together in a multi-year plan, so that we don't have major fluctuations in the tax rate as we move forward. So Mr. Brian Della, our financial advisor, can be available for the meeting if you've got questions for him as well. I believe talked with Mr. Channing. I believe he's available, and Mr. King could be there virtually.
By a phone? Yes. Will phone be sufficient?
Yes. And any other information you want, or we can, if you've got questions now and you can prepare answers before next week, just shoot them our way and we'll get what you need.
Okay. Do you have anything, Mr. Duffy? Or?
No, we talked earlier this morning about the construction managers that cost almost $300,000. Do you have anybody on staff that could do that? Anybody that we can avoid those costs?
There's a reason they cost that much money, and maybe Mr. Kane can talk about exactly what they do for that. We did have Tim Hager help manage the construction of the ambulance project, which is obviously a much smaller project, 1/20th of this. I think there are advantages.
Well, there are a number of things that they will do. They clearly become your eyes and ears throughout the course of the project. And I look at their work as kind of falling into 2 areas. There's the services that they provide during the design phase. I'll come back to that in a minute. And then there's the services that they provide during the construction phase. During the design phase, what they will be able to provide to you and to us are well-informed estimates on the cost of the construction as the drawings develop. And they will give to you 2 to 3 at different points during that design phase, very well-informed estimates as to where the construction is, the cost. So that assures all of us that when bid time comes and bids are received, we're not over budget. And so there's some assurance in that regard. They know the numbers of construction. I don't know them. Tim doesn't know them. And so I think that's one of the benefits that they give to you. But I think most importantly, during the construction phase, they will be on site. They will have somebody here on site during the course of the entire project. And that they are then likewise looking out on your behalf. I know Tim can certainly would love to walk the construction site every day, but I imagine he has other things that he needs to do as well. So I think there are a lot of benefits that the construction manager provides to the county.
Mr. Slender?
So that's the why. How do we get to the amount of 300,000 being the compensation for those services?
I understand the need for it. But this is gonna be the concern that we're gonna have next week is we're looking at 8 million. And if there's ways that we can bring that number down without compromising the integrity of the project, that's something that we need to consider. So how is the $300,000 allocation for this position justified? Is that a percentage of the project? Is that what a normal salary would be? Is that benefits? Is that parking? Or?
You know, I can't speak exactly for the construction manager. I've talked to several who would be interested in this project. One of them being Martin Johnson, and has worked with the county in the past. I asked them, because I need to put the budget together, tell me where do you think your fees would run? And they've said anywhere between 3 to 4% of construction. So in the number that I put together, I put 3.5. I found the middle point. And that, at least in the budget that I had prior to the assembly room and restructuring the courthouse, it's a little over $200,000, but it's a lot of money, yes.
Mr. Kane, you talked about a construction manager at risk, which is that person that would also want to do some of the work.
Potentially, yes.
Potentially. So is that 3 to 4% negotiable then? I mean, if you were to hire someone like that and they're gonna get some work, why would they need all that extra? You know what I mean?
I'm not the construction manager, and I know we work with many of them. Most of the work that we see being done by counties goes the construction manager route. I think it would be in your best interest to interview construction managers and give them the opportunity to explain why their services are worthwhile on the project. If I could say that.
And
Mr. Hawk.
yeah, and we're planning on the construction manager being acquired through an RFP process where we would analyze the services rendered versus the cost, and so we would know, at that point, what their cost is and what they're going to do for that cost. So, there is some competition involved in obtaining that service, and we would then certainly, provide a break for better taste of the service.
Okay, Mr. Kinsley.
One question that's really bothered me, so I'll ask it. And I don't know if it can be answered, but I was involved in a project, and we all learned from our experiences in life that we put a dollar amount out there, 8 million, and we think we do our best to guess where we're going to be at. But the bottom line is, I think, when the bids go out and they come in, that's when we're going to know what the actual dollar amount's going to be. And so we use the best we can to get to the 8 million, but we aren't going to know until the bids actually come in.
Thank you. Okay, anything else for the courthouse project update, which is coming to county board, the resolution next week? You good, Mr. Hunt?
Any direction as far as where you want your county board meetings? Is the current method that we do that satisfactory to you? Do you want us to build that into the plan? Any thoughts on what direction that they want to go?
Well, I said my piece of finance regarding multi-purposing some of these rooms. That was just my thought, but go ahead, Mr. Kinsley.
We'd be foolish not to build a meeting room, a room that could be used for the county board, and various of other things. I mean, obviously we need it for committees, and I don't know if I want to say that it could be used for the county board, because I also like to think we're sitting here with 2 courtrooms. We should be able to use one of the courtrooms a big percentage of that time for the county board to meet in if we need that kind of room. So I probably talk on both sides of my mouth, but we need the room. When, like, example, last night when Mr. King was nice enough to go through this with the Public Works Committee, he talked about remodeling this room for Point North. Just Point, excuse me, thank you. And right away I thought, well, now we don't have an assembly room, what are we gonna do? And Mr. King was nice enough to say, yes, that's something he's had in the plans before, but he doesn't have it in his plan.
Mr. Duffy.
Have we talked about what is the extra cost that we would make another assembly room?
Well,
How much more would that add?
Oh, you will know that in a few days.
Yeah, I didn't guess.
No, I'm not gonna try. Whatever it is, you'll remember it, and I will.
Sorry, yeah.
Well, that's important, how much money is it?
Oh, it is, yes.
I think what I'll give to Tom, we have numbers for the work that we discussed, it's in the plans. And I can give to you some costs for the other pieces that we discussed. I mean, I can tell you that veteran services is about $650,000, all said and done. That's it's a line item in my budget. That's not a solution, it's just a line item of money. There are ways that I'd like to think that there are solutions to veteran services aren't going to cost $650,000. That's why I threw out the idea. There were other buildings that the county owned, or that you were in a position to purchase a building that might exist and be available, that is in a good location and in a condition that's better than the building that's across the street. I'm trying to think out loud and think of all the possibilities that might exist.
Gotta go with Mr. Schleter and then Mr. Kinsey.
Actually, I was gonna say what you just said, maybe we need to look outside the box, and especially with Gary's needs, which you talked about, for a safe place for the veterans to gather. Maybe we do find something off campus. Let's make it 650,000, but rent something off campus in the future somehow. I think it's a good idea to consider.
Mr. Kinsey.
Leon, this morning in finance, you said something similar to like an add-on cost.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you could touch on that a little bit, please.
There's a concept called bad alternates, which the assembly room could be one of those. And what it would mean is that the drawings that would go out to bid would be the whole project, but then we would identify on the drawings that this assembly room is what we call an additive alternate. And so you'd have a separate standalone number for that. So that when bids come in, and if the bids are favorable and there's money there, then you accept the alternate, meaning you have the number, it's been bid and it's on the bidder's list. You're not negotiating for it later on or after the fact. And we could easily do that with the assembly room because it's kind of it's an add-on to the project. There's probably there's some additional drawing that we have to do to identify that, but that might be something that we would want to give some thought to. So then you know what it's going to cost at bid date. And there may be other things that we would look at in the project that we could take as alternates as well.
Yeah, Mr. Schlender.
So, Mr. Chairman, there's a distinct difference between heartstrings and purse strings. And we're going to hear a lot of commentary about the need to support veterans, the need to provide better support for the employees that come to work every day, the need for the criminal justice system. I really wish that we had a capacity to hear what the arguments were, the discussions were when they were debating building this facility back in, the late 50s, early 60s, when they were working out what the needs were, what they needed for the courtroom, what they needed for office space, and if this was what their contemplated mission was. So the thing I would say this is we all have a responsibility as county board members to make a decision, not just to be conscious of what the cost is right now, but what is the contribution that we're leaving for this county that's going to be 50 years in the future. And I think that needs to be somehow articulated because, there's another saying, right? Penny wise and dollar foolish is if we save the money that we're trying to do immediately right now, what are we shortchanging in the future for whatever other challenges that we're going to have? The other thing I would say, Mr. Chairman, is we have a vote that's coming up and we currently have a vacancy And so you are in the unique position of completely destroying someone's future by making them have to vote on something the day of. And I hope that whatever your selection is, whatever your recommendation for filling Mr. Morgan's position, because Mr. Morgan was in support of this project, you're going to put that person in a very specific, unique challenge in terms of having to get up to speed on that. And I hope that there's efforts made for you to come to your decision, and that you don't, because we're going to have it's going to be a tough vote.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I understand, Jim, and I've already thought of that.
Do we need 12 based on the 15, or do we need the vote based on 14 when we come in there, because we have an open seat?
Either way, 75% is 12 votes.
Oh, okay.
And I've thought of that, Jim, thank you. Okay, anything else? Mr. Payne, Mr. Howe, committee?
Are you done with me?
Nope, not even close.
We're just getting started.
We're at the Y right now. I have to get to the house.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, John, I really like your add-on alternate you're talking about for these options. That's nice. And then get us those numbers as soon as you can. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Kane. All right, if nothing else, we'll move on then to board policy discussion regarding virtual meeting attendance. Rule 2, meetings and quorum. Okay. Tom, it looks to me like numbers 8, 9, and 10.
Those are the things specifically in your board rules that address virtual meetings, which was kind of put in there last spring when we started having issues with the virus, obviously, and allowing participation virtually for these meetings. But I think you need to kind of take a look at that and see if that's what you want to continue with, if there's any changes that you want in order to have that participation. A couple of things, there are board members that have trouble, meeting during the day or at night, whatever the case may be. We've also had, a closed session last evening, which also presents, challenges in taking people out of the meeting while the closed session discussion is happening, but allowing them back in for an open session afterwards, and those kinds of particulars. So, now that we have some experience in virtual meetings, you can discuss, if you contemplate any changes to your board rules to accommodate or not virtual meetings.
Okay. So how do we feel about number 8, Mr. Schluter?
Just a quick question, how did you resolve that issue?
There's a functionality within the Zoom software that allows Mike to put people into a waiting room. So they go into a waiting room so they can still stay connected to the meeting, but they don't hear anything until they're allowed back into the meeting.
It's good to know, because that influences how I feel about virtual meetings in the future.
And we did just talk about how well Mike is doing and how these virtual meetings are improving all the time. That's got to play a role. I think lately I've seen a lot better attendance with the virtual option. I've been to several meetings now where everyone has been either present or virtual. Mr. Schlunder.
Well, I think that this is an unavoidable reality. And one of the criticisms for requiring in-person was to justify representation that the person was putting the time in. And I think that that's an unrealistic, given COVID and some of the other restrictions that we have with schools and such being virtual, that people who are board members have other responsibilities. And so providing the flexibility for virtual participation, I think is a necessity that we need to incorporate going forward. And then putting a restriction on the amount of virtual participations is, I think that needs to be revisited. And that, again, Mr. Colson, your ability to adapt to all of these things is remarkable.
Mr. Kinsley.
I believe you have one board member that can't make it, and you said that sometimes we wouldn't have a forum if they're doing it, if we're public safety.
Wasn't for public safety, it's for econ.
No, it's public safety too.
It's public safety.
Well, I guess where I'm going anyway is, I think we have to continue to have virtual meetings, at least for a while until we see what happens. But I would like to revisit again, maybe 6 months and see if things have changed by then, but as for now, I think we have.
We can do that. So we really need to address number 10, correct? And Tom or Rebecca, did you have any comment on some language that we could look at? I didn't mean to catch you off guard there.
Before she starts, I thought we visited this a few months ago and we were going to leave it for a year. Yeah. That's what I recall.
So what are we, I mean, what is it that we're trying to accomplish today?
Well, I mean, in your board rules, you don't allow more than 3 meetings per year virtually. You've also got a quorum is physically present. You know, sometimes you've got meetings where you don't have physical attendance.
We're jumping, so I think we're rehashing a conversation that we did put in front of the full board, which was to suspend Rule 10 for 1 year. And that now you're asking us to revisit the definition of physically present under rule number 9. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, is our year up, Tom? Or coming up? Where we would revert back to including number 10?
Yeah.
Maybe it'd be easier because we'd have to go through the minutes to find it. Not that it can't be done. Maybe from this point forward, we could say in 6 months, let's revisit that step. My thoughts. And then for number 9, yeah, we have to deal with number 9 because an example last night, we had 3 people virtual and I called it as a full committee present for the quorum, which by this rule, that would be incorrect, but we have to do something with that. That's what I see.
So Mr. Hoff, we did strike number 10 then, right? Correct, for 1 year?
We suspended it.
Suspended it, thank you.
Now maybe Rebecca has something for I really interrupt her.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I'd have to go back and look at the minutes regarding the suspension of Rule 10. Because I know when you had the emergency declaration before you started, that suspended certain rules. Obviously, some of those related to the virtual. These changes were made after or just prior to the expiration of that emergency declaration. So I don't recall that Rule 10 then was suspended for a year. Now, I certainly could be wrong, but I want to go back and check that. And you do have the option, if you wanted to, I don't want to say override, if there was a year suspension and say that now you would like to have it for 6 more months, you can do that. I would recommend if you do that sort of suspension, to put that clearly in the board rules. So then we don't have to have the discussion of did we do that?
So we should put the date in there with it.
Mm-hmm. Right, so this rule is suspended through, say, August 1. Then if you change your mind and something happens before August 1, you can always change it again. Or if you want to extend it past that date, you could do so too. But then it's very clear in your rules what is suspended and what's not.
Rebecca, could we just strike number 10 and then, like Mr. Kinsley was saying, revisit it in 6 months?
Certainly.
Is that cleaner versus suspend or what?
Well, I think to, just given the circumstances of how, your attendance has sort of unfolded in the last, 9 months or so forth, I think rule number 9 is really important. Because once if you allow a quorum, if members are not physically present, that is then going to impact number 10. So if you allow a quorum to be accomplished if someone is virtual, you're most likely going to have more members attending virtually. So I think you almost want to look at rule number 9 first.
Yeah, well, I'll one more to it.
And then rule number 8.2, this, gives the county board chair, the power to hold a meeting virtually. But that's more of a case-by-case declaration. And it's not a declaration of, yes, you can attend virtually. It's an actual hold, anticipated to be a whole meeting.
Mr. Colson, you scroll to this topic. So meetings and quorum, is that just understood to be the county board and not committee meetings?
Tom, is this,
I think there was something else later on that talks about committees and refer back to rule this or rule that, or committees as well. I don't know if that was one of them.
In support of what Ms. Roper is saying, one, I'm really hesitant to just strike a rule midstream. I mean, this is something that these rules are in place that are usually a combination of reasons, something that kind of did happen. And if we're going to strike things, that's something that should be allowed for the full board to decide. These rules govern, and I would hate to have a committee making a rule that has an unintended impact on another committee. Mr. Colson, can you scroll down back on the bottom of the 2 again, please? And then second is, if the county board chair or committee chair may authorize a meeting to be held virtually if deemed necessary, that would be the language I would add. If a quorum of the board is physically present with like a semicolon or something in there saying physically present shall be an engaged virtual presence. That's what we do at the college for our students, so that they can show us that they've got internet connectivity and that their face is present, then we consider them present for purposes of attendance. If we can have some kind of similar recognition for that, for physically present, so that we know that their face is there and that they're able to participate. If we can make that, if we can incorporate that as a temporary provision for virtual, and then and that for meeting the definition of quorum, and then I would still have number 10 suspended, because the reason why that's in place was not because of the virtual component. It was to make sure that county board members didn't just not participate, just check the box and not show up. And so we want to compel some kind of listen. Well, I say that because we choose this work, we go through this oath, and we have a professional responsibility to do that. Some wander off on that. I'm must assuming that Mr. Kinsey, you got more experience, Mr. Schluter, that maybe there was board members who, once they started, no longer participated. And so we want to make sure that we hold them accountable, amongst ourselves. That's my 2 cents.
so you would suspend Rule 10, Mr. Slender, for another year, 6 months? What are you thinking?
I just would not strike. I would not
Yeah,
strike.
not strike it. Suspend rule number 10. Go ahead.
I am reluctant to do anything with Rule 10 at this meeting, because we don't know the date it was incorporated, we don't know exactly what it said, we don't know what the sunset date was supposed to be. Let's not monkey with that until the next one, we get a full report on just what it is. We may be striking or
Okay.
suspending, but we can move ahead with 9. I know that'll have an effect, but we'll take care of that when we go to the next one.
Are you ready to address number 9, like Mr. Slender mentioned?
Yeah, and what you said for number 9, if you could boil that down to a short motion, I would second.
Well, and do we also want to modify number 8? So
Yes.
we have board chair and committee for state
Yeah, I like
committee chair?
that. I like that too.
Can I comment on that, Mr. Chairman? In looking at the board rules, it explicitly says that Rule 7 applies to committees. Rule 7 is not what we're talking about here. So I encourage you that if you,
Can you see what rule 7 is?
Rule 7 is voting and procedure.
He's going to bring it up on the screen.
I don't think it's
We just have a
here.
single page loaded for this purpose.
My 7
You
is
don't have your
different.
board rules loaded?
Mine 7 is different.
I'm kidding.
My 7 says a majority of board members who are entitled to a seat shall constitute a quorum.
Well, let me ask you this, if I may. For number 8, the county board chair may authorize the meeting to be held virtually. So we're asking, I believe you're asking, can the committee do that? Well, all you do is ask the chair and you can say yes or no and you move forward. Wouldn't that be the same thing?
I think so. So I don't know what 7 says.
Okay,
No, because rule, according to the board rules, Rule 2, which we're talking about, does not apply, it's not explicitly applied to committees. You could argue that it does, but then there's the counter argument, then why does the committee section specifically say that Rule 7 applies? You know, if it was intended to be a blanket application, you wouldn't be calling out Rule 7.
What's the title of Rule 7?
Voting and procedure, I believe.
So it doesn't deal with meetings and quorum. So I would just add, and I would just propose, and then you can put this to the full board for discussion. So my motion would be, I make a motion to modify Rule 2, Section 8, to incorporate committee chair, and to further modify Rule 2, Section 9, to include a clause that identifies virtual to equal present, virtual for purposes of quorum. And then when we get to the full board meeting, we can push out what virtual can mean, because to me, it would mean you have to have your face on the screen. So if you don't have the ability to do that, then you don't have the ability to get one.
here's a question, if I may. I understand where you're coming from. I'm on the sticks and I can't get virtual, but I can do it by phone.
You can still vote. You can still participate in the meeting, but we would need to make sure that we have other quorum in order to make the quorum.
Good.
Because the thing is that we got to verify who's making that motion or that.
Yeah. Good.
So can you put some language together for tonight? Jim, I know you're in.
That's
Put corn.
Words are getting shorter as we go here.
Just briefly,
Yeah,
after our, before and after our Public Works meeting last night, I did some more research in terms of the ability to have a closed session virtually. And if, you know, with respect to the open records requirements, it is appropriate. I would say next time we have that, where you have a closed session virtually, just have each member certify that they are present and they are alone. Because the thing that happened at the meeting last night is somebody had something going on in the background and wasn't on screen. And so for a closed session, you want to make sure, I mean, obviously you can't be there to patrol, but if you have a member certified that they're present and they're alone, that's a good way to get around one of those challenges of virtual meetings.
And that's no different than we expect everybody to abide by the rule. What you hear in closed session stays in closed session. It's the same thing as a trust issue.
Correct.
So Rebecca, can you help give us language in 9 then? That would reflect what Mr. Schlender. Is it addressing your motion, correct, sir?
I can definitely come up with some language, but can you help remind me what you?
So
So
looking at it, if a quorum of the board is present, physically or virtually, a majority of the board may allow a board member to attend the meeting through telephone conference or other electronic means, which actually addresses Mr. Kinsley's question about being on a phone. And then I would just say the chair, county board or committee chair may authorize a meeting to be held virtually if deemed necessary. And my motion would be to have those modifications added for those for Rule 10 or Rule 2, Section 8, Section 9.
Great. Motion on the floor. Then I would second that. Huh?
Just a minute.
Okay.
Is any of this, I think our ultimate goal is to have virtual meetings. year-round years, because that's the technology. So you say, is this going to be clear with that ultimate goal? Are we putting up roadblocks unintentionally that might impede progress in the future?
I don't think so. Because I think the discussion you're having and the motion captures where you're at right now. And, given future uncertainty, even if we have an idea that the goal is more virtual, I think that having these rules that you can amend allows you that flexibility. And as long as you keep attention to them as you have been the last year, you can modify as those circumstances change.
I'm keeping attention. What's the rule? Yes, I'm sorry.
That's it.
You're good with that second one? Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to county board for approval.
And then would you have time to look in the minutes? It's been within the last 12 months, obviously, and see when we did that, and that would interest me. Thank you.
Yeah. Future agenda items. Any other matters for discussion on? Yes, sir.
The situation early this week down in Radisson, where you have animals at large, a number you can call. That number was called and left a message, and there's been no response. And up to this day, there's been no response. Doesn't that person check them periodically, or some reason that there was no response to that?
Sorry, County Animal Control.
Okay, I'll look into that.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
This week, you said? This week?
Monday.
Monday?
Okay, thank you, everyone. You're adjourned. Yeah, you should.